Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. That Egor Demin chose over Arkansas. That is the BYU Cougars. I'll be honest, one, love those Cougars. But two, I'll be honest, I don't know if we've ever done a BYU segment on this pod. Now, maybe when Zach Wilson was there and they were the only school on the West Coast playing football, maybe we did. I don't know if we've ever done a BYU segment, but I got to be honest. To quote that Shaq meme, Kevin Young, new BYU head coach, I got to be blunt. I was not familiar with your game, my man, but credit where it's due. This was a guy, and we've talked about this part a little bit, but he was the lead assistant on the Phoenix Suns. He interviewed for NBA head coaching jobs, and BYU scooped him up, convinced him to come back to college basketball, and I think he has done a hell of a job putting together this first roster, and I'll be blunt. I'm even going to take it a step further. I think when I redo my top 25, now we'll see. We still got a day or two left in this NBA draft decision cycle. But over the course of the next few days, I think, let me put it this way. I think BYU legitimately is a top 25 team right now. And I think they're even going to get better between now and the start of the season. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's give BYU their freaking flowers. Let's give BYU the credit that they deserve. And let's talk a little bit about what BYU has done this offseason. First of all, the biggest move is the one I just referenced. It is the Egor Demin kid who committed on Tuesday. Jonathan Gavoni Woj had it first, excuse me. And listen, I don't think this is hyperbole to say this is the most high-profile basketball recruit that has maybe ever committed to BYU. I think when the final 24/7 rankings come out on 3 rankings, because they'll have to include this kid if he's playing college basketball, I think it's almost certain he is the highest ranked player in history to ever commit to BYU in the rankings era, in the online rankings era. My guess would be he's got to be one of the best ever to commit to BYU. In my head, I'm thinking in the back of my head, maybe Sean Bradley, who obviously is going through some crazy stuff right now. I know he was very high profile coming out of high school. I can't think of anybody since I've really been covering college basketball that fits the profile of Egor Demin. As I said a minute ago, 6 foot. Listen, this kid, legitimate NBA top 10 potential, legitimate NBA lottery potential. Now I know it's an adjustment for just about everybody in college basketball. Okay. At the same time, and I know he's coming from overseas, you can't teach 6'8", fluid ball handler, 3-point shooting, getting everybody else involved. And so you look at this kid, you look at what he's capable of. Again, I don't know that BYU has ever signed a player like him essentially coming out of high school. Now, I know he's not really a high school player because he's not in the States, but it doesn't really matter. But Kevin Young, we got to give him credit on 2 things. One, and listen, I know what everyone's going to say. Oh, it's all about NIL. It's all about this, all about that. No. Kevin Young was a guy who was an NBA assistant coach, as I just said, was with the Phoenix Suns, and he is selling to kids. We're going to run a pro system, a pro style, a pro whatever. We're going to treat this like an NBA team. We're going to run this like an NBA organization, and we're going to recruit NBA caliber players. By the way, not a knock on Mark Pope. I think Kevin Young has some NIL resources that, frankly, Mark Pope maybe didn't. Just like, by the way, Mark Pope has some resources that maybe Calipari didn't. Calipari has some resources that Eric Musselman didn't. Eric Musselman has some resources that Andy Enfield didn't. You get the point. This isn't a bash Mark Pope session. But it's clear to me that Kevin Young is selling, we can be an NBA factory. I know what it takes to get to that level. I was the guy that spent the last couple of years with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. I was the guy that NBA teams wanted as a head coach, and I am here right now at BYU. Also be remiss, can't not acknowledge the fact that we've talked about this guy before. Ryan Smith, I believe, is basically the booster who has really given BYU unlimited resources, whatever they need to compete at the highest level. We talked about him. He is the owner of the Utah Jazz, 46 years old. Per Wikipedia, worth $2.2 billion with a B. Not bad. I don't think I'm going to catch up with him by the time that I'm 46, but he is basically the John Tyson of BYU basketball. He helped get Kevin Young. The reports on Kevin Young is he's making close to $5 million a year at BYU. I think Matt Norlander had that one first. And then on top of that, obviously the NIL is in pretty good position if you're getting these elite players. I think it's also worth noting from the BYU perspective. I think it's been quietly impressive how good he's done of retaining elite talent that was already on the roster. What does Trilly Donovan always say? The best gets are the ones that don't leave your program or something like that. Well, look at BYU. Second leading scorer, Fus Traore, is back. Trevin Nell, third leading scorer, 11 points per game, 39% shooting from three, is back. Spencer Johnson is back. Richie Saunders is back. Dallin Hall is back. I think one of those may not be back. I think Spencer Johnson I may have put wrong in my notes, but like 5 of their top 7 guys are back. And you look at who they lost. They lost Noah Waterman to Louisville. They lost, Ali Khalifa to Louisville, even though he's dealing with an injury. They basically kept virtually everybody they wanted. And now we got to talk about Jaxson Robinson momentarily. I should mention, by the way, also brought in a 4-star recruit that was committed to Stanford, Elijah Crawford. So he's coming in. And I was told, by the way, a couple recruiting notes. One, there is a very high-profile high school player that I believe will be visiting BYU probably in the next 2 weeks. Can't share, won't share. All this stuff is fluid. I've also been told, by the way, very high-profile player. 2, I've also been told that there is a player in this current high school class that basically, when all the dust settles on the NBA draft deadline stuff, is probably going to be asking out of his letter of intent, and I think BYU would be in good shape for him as well. So I don't think they're done for 2024, 2025, and they definitely might not be done. Producer Matt, pop up the tweet that I put out earlier today. I didn't mean to create a firestorm on the internet, but I kind of did. But in reference to Egor Demin, I referenced that he committed, that if you listen to this show, you know that I thought that they were in better shape for Egor Demin. But at the same time, let me also say this. This is the tweet that I put out at 10:17 a.m. I don't know if that was, I think that was Eastern time. But I said, worth noting, as I've said on the Aaron Torres pod, if Jaxson Robinson returns to school, BYU feels like they have a good shot to keep him. Spelled 2 wrong. Tough to do, but I did it. And there will be more recruiting news coming as well. Kevin Young and BYU's boosters are not playing around. And so, look, I'm just here to tell you, they ain't done. And I think he deserves a lot of credit. Now, in terms of that Jaxson Robinson note, let's make one thing clear, because we're going to talk about Kentucky here momentarily. I'm not saying if he returns, he will go to BYU. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is I think everybody just assumes it's a foregone conclusion. He's going to go to Kentucky. He's going to follow Mark Pope. I think that's probably what's going to happen. But if you had asked me 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would have said I think Jaxson Robinson, 0% he returns to BYU. Now, I think if he comes back to college, it's Kentucky. And I think BYU thinks they have a realistic shot to land him. And I'll be curious to see what ends up happening here. The good news, by the way, we're going to get all that information in the next 24 hours because ultimately the NBA draft deadline is coming up here on Wednesday night, midnight Eastern. We can finally stop talking about Jaxson Robinson, Coleman Hawkins, all these guys, stay or go. That is officially in the books.